Shalom, Erev Tov, good evening. This is TV7 Israel News, broadcast to you from Jerusalem. The remains of 2 Israeli hostages were returned to Israel over the weekend, while 4 bodies of hostages remain in Hamas captivity to date. The S&P Global Ratings revises its outlook on Israel's economy from negative to stable. The Islamic Republic of Iran blames Europe and the United States for Tehran's own defiance of international nuclear safeguards. The remains of 2 Israeli hostages were returned from Hamas captivity over the weekend, to include 61-year-old Lior Rudayov, who was murdered on October 7th of 2023, and whose body was held by the Palestinian terror group captive for 764 days, as well as the remains of Lieutenant Hadar Goldin, who was killed on August 1st of 2014 during Operation Protective Edge, and whose remains were held captive for a total of 4,118 days, which amounts to over 11 years. The remains of the late Lior Rudayov were returned to Israel on Saturday.
On Saturday, Command Sergeant Major Reserves Lior Rudayov, he was born in Argentina. He immigrated to Israel when he was 7 years old. He lived on kibbutz near Yitzchak and was the deputy security coordinator and member of the rapid response team right there on October 7th. Lior fought heroically alongside his team that horrific morning of October 7th. He fought off many terrorists outside of the gate of the community. He was ultimately killed in battle, with his body taken hostage into Gaza by terrorists from Islamic Jihad. He was 61 years old at the time he was murdered, and he leaves behind his wife, his 4 children, 3 grandchildren, his father, and his 2 siblings. His remains came home over the weekend.
The next day, on Sunday, the remains of Lieutenant Hadar Goldin, who fell in battle when Islamist Hamas terror operatives exploited a brief cessation of hostilities during the course of the 2014 Operation Protective Edge for the purpose of kidnapping IDF soldiers, was finally returned to Israel.
סגן הדר גולדין נפל בקרב גבורה במבצע צוק איתן לפני 11 שנים. גופתו נחטפה על ידי החמאס, שסירב להחזירו בכל התקופה הזאת. בכל התקופה הזאת עשינו מאמץ גדול בממשלות ישראל להחזירו, כמובן תוך כדי ייסורים קשים של משפחתו, שעכשיו תזכה להחזירו לקבר ישראל.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, during his weekly cabinet meeting, continued by stressing Jerusalem's unwavering resolve to return all of Israel's fallen soldiers, whose remains remain captive beyond the boundaries of the State of Israel.
אנחנו אמרנו בתחילת המלחמה שאנחנו נחזיר את כל החטופים, בלי יוצא מן הכלל. נחטפו 255, זה כולל גם 4 שנחטפו קודם לכן, ואנחנו החזרנו עד היום 250, אנחנו נחזיר את כולם. יש לנו גם מורשת מהקמת המדינה, ממלחמת העצמאות עד מלחמת התקומה, להחזיר את חיילינו שנפלו בקרבות. ואנחנו עושים את זה. לפעמים זה לוקח הרבה זמן, כמו למעלה מ-40 שנה בקרב סולטן יעקב. החזרנו עד עתה 2 מהלוחמים שנפלו שם, יש עדיין לוחם נוסף. זה חובה גדולה שלנו, גם לחיילים שלנו, גם לאנשי הביטחון. אנחנו עמלים על החזרתו של אלי כהן לקבר ישראל, לא מרפים מזה. לכן זה ערך מקודש, הוא הביע את הערבות ההדדית שיש לנו לאזרחי ישראל, ובראש ובראשונה לחיילי ולוחמי ישראל.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that Israel's credit rating was once again raised by the S&P Global Ratings, which revised its outlook for Israel from negative to stable.
דירוג האשראי של ישראל הועלה היום על ידי סוכנות S&P, ויש לכך 2 סיבות. סיבה אחת, צריך להבין שהמעמד הגיאופוליטי של ישראל מאוד התחזק. הוא מאוד התחזק ביחס למה שהוא היה לפני ה-7 באוקטובר. ישראל נתפסת חזקה יותר, האיום הגיאופוליטי והביטחוני הגדול ביותר עליה, איראן, בפירוש שונמך בלשון המקצוענים, כן? זאת אומרת, איראן ספגה מכה גדולה, ישראל עלתה בכוחה, איראן ירדה בכוחה, והאיום הקיומי שהיא אימה עלינו ועל האזור כולו, האיום הזה הורחק מאוד. וזה בסיס אחד למה שמתרחש כרגע, אם כי לדעתי סוכניות הדירוג עדיין לא הפנימו לגמרי את השינוי הגדול שקרה כאן.
It is worth noting that while the revision granted to Israel marked a stable outlook, the rating itself remains unchanged from grade A. Nevertheless, S&P now sees Israel's economy growing by 5% in 2026, with fewer reserve soldiers being called up, which will ease the tight labor market. The fiscal forecast is also slightly improved, but the debt-to-GDP ratio is expected to reach 68% by 2028, which compares with a forecast of 55% before the multi-front war. Meanwhile, on Israel's northern front, vis-a-vis Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Israel Air Force struck the Iranian proxy's infrastructure and 3 terror operatives in the Bekaa Valley, among others, which are all situated in the south of the country, locations in which Hezbollah terror activities were identified in recent months. Moreover, in Nabatiyeh, several terrorist infrastructure sites were struck, to include infrastructure housing strategic weapons production facilities and storage sites, which contravene with the ceasefire agreement that was reached on November 27th of 2024.
Israel continues to insist on the full enforcement of the ceasefire agreement with Lebanon. Israel is taking steps to ensure our security. We will not allow Hezbollah, the terrorist organization, to recover, rebuild its strength and threaten Israel from anywhere in Lebanon. Hezbollah's terrorist activities constitute a violation of the understandings between Israel and Lebanon, and the IDF will continue to operate to remove any threats to the citizens of Israel and our soldiers.
It is important to know that there has been an evident uptick in Israeli enforcement strikes against the Iranian proxy Hezbollah amid clear, concerted efforts by the Iranian terror group to rehabilitate its military infrastructure in Lebanon. Meanwhile, U.S. National Security Council Senior Director Dr. Sebastian Gorka and Undersecretary of the Treasury for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence John Hurley met with Lebanese President Joseph Aoun at the presidential palace in Beirut yesterday, during the course of which the senior American officials discussed ways in which they could partner together with the Lebanese government to stop the flow of money from Iran to Hezbollah and create a safer and more prosperous Lebanon. It is interesting to note that while the Ayatollah regime has sponsored its terror proxies throughout the Middle East for the openly declared intention of annihilating the State of Israel and pushed the United States out of the region, it continues to claim that it is peaceful in nature and that it is merely pushing back at Western demands that humiliate the Islamic Republic.
ما نمیخوایم دعوا کنیم. ما از روز اول اومدیم، ما قصد دعوا کردیم. ما میخوایم تو این دنیا با صلح و امنیت زندگی کنیم. اما قرار نیست با ذلت زندگی کنیم. قرار نیست اونا هر چی دلشون خواست تحمیل بکنند و ما نوکری اونا رو بکنیم. همان گونه که شما میتوانید، مردم ایران ما میتوانند و ما میتوانیم کشوری درست کنیم آباد و سربلند و با قدرت بریم جلو.
In addition to the sheer lies by the President of the Islamic Republic's government, Tehran is pushing back at efforts by the International Atomic Energy Agency to scrutinize the Islamic Republic's nuclear program, deliberately limiting the agency's access.
این رو آژانس باید درک بکنه. شرایط عادی نیست. ما قبل از تجاوز نظامی رژیم صهیونیستی و آمریکا به صورت متعارف با آژانس همکاری داشتیم. بعد از اون هم در قالب تفاهم قاهره برای همکاری در شرایط جدید به تفاهمی دست پیدا کردیم. طرفی که باید سرزنش بشه طرف‌های اروپایی هستن که تلاش کردن با سوء استفاده از سازوکار حل اختلاف برجام قطعنامه‌های لغو شده شورای امنیت رو برگردونن و کل فرایندی که ما با آژانس شروع کرده بودیم رو دچار اختلال کردن.
While the Ayatollah regime continues to defiantly pursue ballistic missiles capable of carrying nuclear payloads, alongside its refusal to abandon a military nuclear program, Tehran is unabashedly calling on the West at large, and the United States in particular, to lift all crippling sanctions imposed on its economy. While Tehran is consistently facing growing economic pressure, it continues to divert much of its funds to advance its military and terror proxies throughout the Middle East at the expense of its own citizens. Thank you for watching TV7 Israel News. I would like to thank you if you're a supporter of TV7 Israel, since your donation is essentially helping us produce our daily updates from here in Jerusalem. If you haven't yet supported TV7 Israel, which is exclusively donation-based, please consider doing so. You can donate via our website at www.tv7israelnews.com. Separately, as ever, pray for our persecuted brothers and sisters worldwide, alongside prayers for the peace of Jerusalem and redemption of Israel. Jonathan Hessen wishing you a Shalom Evolach, and God willing, until our next update, Shalom from Jerusalem.